Good evening. My name is Leon Jones, and what I'm here to do tonight is to give you some information on how to keep your food service establishment safe and sanitized because when it comes to food establishments, a number of sicknesses, illnesses occur every year. Now, the information that I'm going to present to you comes from the CDC. It comes from the seventh edition of the Servsafe Coursebook and other sources. Now, it is very important for you as a restaurant manager to understand food safety and sanitation in your establishment. And here are some reasons that I have come up with. Number one, you want to make sure that your restaurant will always have a good reputation. And I say this because there are a number of individuals out there who are trying to start restaurants, and generally, in the first 3 to 5 years, 3/4 of them fail. Why? Because they don't understand how to run a restaurant. They don't have any procedures in place. And number two, you have to worry about your insurance premiums. You have to worry about, and here's number three, you have to worry about employees. How many of them get sick? So what I'm going to present to you tonight is a food safety operations resource guide that I came up with. Now, it's very important that you listen to this information because what I'm going to start off with is procedures for washing hands. I'm going to get into prepping. There's going to be cleaning. There's also going to be some procedures for cooking a particular sandwich, such as a hamburger. Let me share my screen. Again, what you're looking at is my version of a food safety operations guide. And I'm going to start off with personal hygiene. Now, personal hygiene is very important because if you don't have proper personal hygiene, chances are that you are going to spread an illness to another person, whether they be a customer or another employee or even a manager. Now, you remember something. Senior citizens are at the highest risk because they have a weakened immune system. Also, preschool children, they're at a high risk because their immune system hasn't been fully developed. So, getting into personal hygiene, first thing I want to talk about is my hand washing policy and procedure. Now, as a food handler, in every kitchen, you must use designated hand washing stations to wash your hands. Very important. Number two, all food handlers, when you wash your hands, you should wash them for 10 to 15 seconds before touching any surfaces or equipment that is used for food preparation. Now, this is a policy that some people agree with, some people don't. Now, I'm talking about nails. Now, if you're going to wear nails in food establishments, you should keep them short. You shouldn't wear any nail polish. Lastly, you shouldn't wear false nails. Now, if you do, you wear what we call a glove over your fingernails. And something that I didn't put into this policy, I know we're dealing with hands. If you have hair, utilize a hairnet. There have been situations where hair has gotten in the food. I've come across that myself during my experiences of eating out. And again, the type of glove you want to use is a single use glove when false nails come into play. Now, if you're handling ready to eat food like fried chicken or salads, you must use disposable single use gloves. What about if an employee is sick? All right, here are my guidelines. All staff must present a signed statement that they will report any illness. Number two, all staff must report any illnesses before reporting to work. Number three, if any food handler is ill, they will be restricted from working with food and utensils. Now, let me get into food protection. So the first item I'm going to talk about is romaine lettuce. Now, of course, lettuce is produce. So when we deal with romaine lettuce, and I'm talking about a whole head of lettuce, not shredded lettuce, it must be stored at a temperature of 41 degrees Fahrenheit. Always store separately from raw meat, and you store above raw meat if there is no other option. When we deal with ground beef, must be frozen when it's received. Now, if you find that there are any water stains or fluids on the packaging, reject it. Reject also if liquids or ice crystals are found on or in the packaging. Last, you ensure there is a use by date on the packaging. Now, when we deal with raw whole chicken, again, it must be stored at a temperature of 41 degrees Fahrenheit or lower. It should be stored in an airtight container or material or its original packaging. And it must be firm to touch with no discoloration or odor. Again, it must be firm to touch with no discoloration or odor. Now, if any of those occur, reject the product and always store on the lowest shelf. And the reason why you do that, because anytime juices come from a chicken, there is a risk of contamination that will occur. Now, dealing with flour. A lot of us fry chicken, shrimp, make cakes. With flour, you have to be careful with flour as well. Make sure it doesn't have weevils in it. But when you have flour, you want to store it room temperature in a dry storage. Also, flour must be labeled with a use by date. If there are liquid stains on the packaging, immediately reject the product. And it must be stored in a container that is labeled, and you keep it 6 inches off the floor. Canned tomatoes, store at room temperature in a dry storage. You reject product if labels are removed or cans are damaged. Also ensure there is a use by date on canned products. And again, store at least 6 inches off the floor. Moving on, and I'm going to deal with food protection. And during this experiment, we'll talk about grilling a hamburger with lettuce and tomato. Now, first of all, when you prepare any type of ground beef, if you want to thaw it, you utilize cold water. So ground beef must be thawed by running cold water over it. Also, if you're making them by hand, of course, you have to have gloves on, but you want to roll ground beef into 2-inch diameter balls, then flatten to make quarter-pound patties. And when we deal with lettuce, you prep lettuce by shredding it into sandwich slices, place into a pan, store in the refrigerator at a temperature of 41 degrees Fahrenheit until it is ready to be used. Then you cut tomato into slices and also place into a separate pan, then store in the refrigerator at a temperature of 41 degrees until the tomato slices are ready to use. Now, after we've prepared it, now it's time to cook it. Now, what you do with hamburgers. Hamburgers can be grilled on a broiler, or they can be grilled on a flat grill. Now, the temperatures that I'm going to be using are from a flat grill. So what you do, you place quarter-pound patties onto a grill at a medium-high temperature of 375 to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, this is when the ground beef hasn't been frozen. But if the ground beef has been frozen, you want to preheat the grill to 325 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, if the patties have not been frozen, you brown each side 3 to 5 minutes, 15 minutes each side if frozen. Also, use a instant read thermometer to check the internal temperature once quarter-pound patties reach a temperature of 155 degrees for a time of 15 seconds. Once that happens, it's done. And then with single-use gloves on, this is when you put your sandwich together by placing a tomato, slice of tomato, lettuce on top of the bun, then remove the quarter-pound patty from the grill and place on the bottom of bun. Now we're going into safe handling procedures. We're going to deal with chili, meat and beans. Must be held at a temperature of 165 degrees Fahrenheit. Must be cooled from a temperature of 135 degrees Fahrenheit to a temperature of 70 degrees Fahrenheit within 2 hours. Then from a temperature of 70 degrees Fahrenheit to a temperature of 41 degrees Fahrenheit within the next 4 hours. Now, if you are going to get it out of a cool spot like a refrigerator, must be reheated to an internal temperature of 165 degrees for a time of 15 seconds within 2 hours to hold. After that, discard it. Crisis management. As you know, there are disasters that can occur, fires, hurricanes, even robberies, which you still have to keep your establishment open, or if it has to close, you have to have procedures on what to do. So I'm going to show you those procedures right now. Now I'm going to deal with a power outage, and basically, and this is for a restaurant, your crisis management team is always going to be your general manager, chef, and owner. Why? The general manager is basically the front of the house manager. The chef is the back of the house or kitchen, and then you have your owner. So what you do during a power outage, you always check your refrigeration equipment And when you do that, you write down the time refrigeration units stop working. And you periodically record food temperatures. You also keep refrigeration unit closed. And if you have ice, if possible, pack food on ice. Now, for the hot side, and when I talk about hold equipment, basically talk about your steam tables. Write down the time the food or the hot food unit stopped working. Now, if any foods are under 135 degrees, now you're going to hear me mention 41, 135. That's known as the danger zone. That's when bacteria can grow. So if there are any foods under 135 degrees, discard immediately. And that's if power is out longer than 4 hours. Now, if power is out less than 4 hours, food may be reheated to a temperature of 135 degrees. Now, in the kitchen is where you're going to have all the hoods, the fans, and the ventilation. Well, if that stopped working, then what needs to happen is you have to shut down the operation. And that includes the food preparation area and, of course, the cooking area. Finally, we get into cleaning and sanitizing. Cleaning and sanitizing is very important because this is what can make you or break you in the restaurant industry. And I say that because without proper cleaning, and when I worked in the hospitality industry, I hated cleaning, but I understand why you have to do it. It's a purpose behind it. It's a health hazard. And if you don't clean, pests can enter your establishment, and then you'll have a lot of problems then, especially flies, gnats, fruit flies. So I'm going to give you some procedures on cleaning and sanitizing. Now, basically, in every restaurant kitchen, you have a 3-compartment sink. But before you even go to the 3-compartment sink, there's something that you have to do first. You have to scrape off leftover food from pots, pans, and kitchen utensils. Now, I'm dealing with the kitchen only, particularly if you've been working in a prep area. Now, when you want to utilize your sink, you have to set it up. So first, you fill the sink with warm water and detergent to a minimum temperature of 110 degrees Fahrenheit. Again, fill the first sink with water and detergent or soap to a minimum temperature of 110 degrees Fahrenheit, because this sink will be used to scrub pots and pans and kitchen utensils. Second, you fill up the middle or the second sink with clean water to a minimum temperature of 110 degrees for rinsing. And then third, this is where you utilize your sink to soak the dishes in a chemical sanitizing solution. Now, when we deal with chemicals, chemicals come from an approved manufacturer. So again, you refer to the directions provided by your chosen sanitizer to determine how long the dishes need to remain submerged. Alternately, you can use hot water at a temperature of 171 degrees Fahrenheit or hotter instead of sanitizing chemicals. Now, if you choose to sanitize in hot water, leave the dishes sitting in the scalding water for a minimum of 30 seconds. And finally, after you scrape, wash, rinse, you always air dry pots and pans and utensils. And the reason why you do that is because if you don't, there's always a risk of contamination. Now, when we get into restaurants, cleaning is big. I was in the United States Navy and we had to do a lot of cleaning there as well. But you need to have a cleaning schedule because if you keep your equipment clean, it also lasts longer. Also, if you keep your stations clean, and if everybody does their job, you won't have to have a deep cleaning every week. Now, you should have a deep cleaning. Now, what I'm going to say is very pertinent because if you want good cleanliness in your kitchen, make sure kitchen personnel have enough supplies to complete their assigned tasks. And as a manager or PIC person in charge, walk around the kitchen and list each area that must be cleaned. Determine how often the area is used and when it should be cleaned. Also, assign each person to an area that has to be cleaned. And here's something that will always help you. If you understand Excel or Word, utilize a checklist and put the duties that are assigned to different people. And once they have completed their duties, inspect their duties and then have them sign off. So what I'm going to say in short, create a checklist and have each person sign off on their assigned duties. And then the chef, the owner, whoever's in charge, at the end of every cleaning session, kitchen personnel and a manager on duty need to run down a final checklist to ensure that nothing was overlooked and that he or she is leaving the kitchen safe, secure, and ready for the next shift. And also as a manager, you have to basically visually inspect the work of your kitchen personnel. And again, if you want to know where I got the information from, here are all of my references. And again, I hope you enjoyed this presentation. And I believe that every food service establishment should have a food safety operations resource in place. And if you're at home cooking, you should establish one as well. Because over Thanksgiving, I've seen a lot of bad habits. But once again, thank you for viewing this information and tell me how you like it. Once again, my name is Leon Jones. Have a wonderful and gracious night.